Hey everybody, it's LaShonda from Labors of Love here with another Therapy Thursday. And today we are celebrating. What are we celebrating? We are celebrating the 1 year anniversary of the LOL pod. I am so excited. So on February 4th, 2019 is the day that we dropped our very first podcast episode. And
it was 2020.
It was 2020. Okay, so listen, let me tell you why I just said 2019 instead of 2020. Because in so many regards, it's like 2020 didn't happen and happened too much. So when I'm trying to figure out when something was, it's happened a couple of times that 2020 has gone out. So you're right. As my producer helped me realize, I'm sorry, the 1 year of the LOL pod, and we dropped our first official episode on February 4th, 2020. A year. And I am so excited. I'm so excited because this wasn't even my idea. I want to again give a special thank you to all of the people who encouraged me and motivated me to start the podcast. And to date, we have had over 10,000 streams, listens, downloads. That means over 10,000 times. And honestly, we are super, super close to 11,000. So almost 11,000 times people made a conscious decision to turn on the Labors of Love podcast and listen to the many, many wonderful guests that I've had on share their labors of love. They've tuned in to listen to my musings as a therapist or the wisdom that I'm trying to share. And for that, I am so grateful. I want to take this opportunity to just say a very special thank you to every single one of my guests. You know, it started off with in-person recordings. So these were people that were in my life that I knew, and I wanted to specifically highlight and broadcast their labors of love to the world. And we went remote at a certain point, which allowed us access to so many more people. And this thing, y'all, it's grown so much that there have been guests that have been on this podcast that I have never met before. I didn't know them before someone said, hey, I know this person will be a fantastic guest. Or someone reached out and said, hey, I think I could really give some insight to your listeners, or people have connected us. And so I am just so grateful that my life has been enhanced because I've had the opportunity to meet so many amazing people, some of which I would have never known if it wasn't for this podcast. Y'all, we have talked about so much stuff, okay? We have talked about trauma and relationships and mental health. That's my thing. But it's also, we've talked about hair, y'all, periods. We've talked about caring for ourselves in relationships. We've talked about writing in the creative process. We've talked about young people and how their voice is important. We've talked about racism and oppression, and we've talked about that in a real and raw way a couple of times. You know, we've talked about everything from domestic violence to work that I'm doing within Christian churches to help them understand racism and oppression. We've talked about adoption and grief. We've talked about neuroscience, y'all. There have been so many things that we have talked about. And again, what I'm learning is that, you know, people want to hear what we have to say. And so again, special thank you and shout out to every single one of my guests and previous guests. And I am so excited about guests we already have lined up to continue as we go into our second year. And I mean it, if you have suggestions for guests, or if you yourself want to be a guest, don't hesitate to reach out. I want to use my platform so people's voices can be heard. And in closing, I know I say it every episode, but I feel like I need y'all to know that my guests, my listeners, I appreciate you all so much For every single listener who's reached out to me through my website, through email, or said something on social media to just encourage me, thank you. I want to say, if this podcast has touched you in any way, if you make it a point to tune in and you think like, man, this is on point, let me know. Email is great. You can send it through my website, write a review. Why? Because it helps me to keep going. Sometimes I'm like, am I just talking to myself? And that's fine if I am, because I'm listening. But it's so nice to know that it's impacting other people. And that's not just for me. If there are people who are putting themselves out there vulnerably, which this is, I put my full life very transparently on display, so that people can be healed, so that I can leave people better than I find them. And it is so helpful to get encouragement. If you know someone else who's putting out content and you really appreciate their work, let them know. It gives us so much hope and helps us go forward. So thank you, listeners, for your diligence, for coming back, and for supporting the Labors of Love podcast. And again, my final shout outs to my nephew, Trey Angel, who did the music. He's such a talented young man, and I'm so grateful for his gift. And finally, y'all, my producer is the bomb. He is amazing. The fact that I get to share my life with him as my partner, it's just amazing. He is so selfless in many ways. He makes sure that this podcast is done with excellence and that he just keeps me motivated. So shout out to Jay Sugg from Instant Classic Media. Thank you. Almost 11,000 times people have listened to this podcast, and I could not be more grateful. So again, if you want to reach out to me, please reach out, find the website, www.thelaborsoflove.com. Don't forget, we're on all the major social media outlets. If you haven't already, please head over to Instagram and follow our new page specifically for the podcast, _LOL_pod. And if you haven't given a 5-star review or written a 5-star rating or written a review for the podcast, please just take a few minutes to do that. Let people know that there's some good stuff out there so that all the great content that we have coming out can reach more people. You all, until we connect again, be well.